As like somebody that's doing reselling and online arbitrage, there's already an existing listing, right? So in that aspect, if that's what you're referring to, then you're not worried about the customer or the product reviews on that actual listing, right? You don't care about that, right? Assuming that there's at least one, and assuming that you're sourcing a listing that has, some reviews, if you're talking about how your seller feedback fits into that, then it doesn't really matter in my opinion. I would say get started. You're gonna eventually accumulate feedback. You'll accumulate feedback as you start selling more. But most people, when they go to click the buy box, they're not checking the seller's feedback. Like I never do that, and I don't think the majority of buyers do that either. So like at no point in time, if you actually do win the buy box, will a buyer be concerned with your seller feedback? Most of the time, okay? Most of the time. Now, if you're in like the used like news or like the used, and somebody clicks over on used and they're looking at the different feedback ratings and like all the other competing sellers, then yeah, that might be an issue at that point. But most of the time you're going for, you're gonna try to get the buy box if you're buying new or used stuff, especially if it's like a used books, there's still a buy box for the used books. So best answer for that is like, no, it doesn't really matter about your seller feedback. I wouldn't really worry about that initially. I would just say like start selling things and eventually, you'll accumulate some seller feedback over time. The only way that's actually going to affect you in the beginning is because you don't have a lot of feedback and because you don't have a lot of positive seller metrics. And this is not necessarily like just a feedback thing. This is just because you haven't sold a lot on your seller account. You're not going to get the buy box as much compared to other sellers that have better seller metrics and better feedback, right? But ultimately, that's just one of the things that goes into who gets the buy box. The most important things are price and availability to customers, okay? So if you can hit the price home, right, and you match the price on the buy box, and you have the best availability to a customer, right, meaning like if yours is in like a New Jersey, warehouse or prep center, right? Or FBA center, and the buyer somewhere local to Jersey, and the other person on the buy box that might have the buy box is competing with you on the same price, but their inventory is in like Texas or California, and the buyer is in New Jersey or in like PA or somewhere close, then obviously you have a greater chance to win the buy box because you have the same price as them, but your availability to the customer, Amazon's ability to deliver it to that customer through your actual product is a lot better, right? So in that aspect, you would probably win the buy box. Now, one of the other competing factors, like if all else is even and two sellers have the same price and the same availability to the customer and all else is even, that's when seller feedback comes into play and seller metrics come into play. So it is, I'd be lying to you if I said it wasn't like a variable or a factor, but it's not one that you should focus on initially. It doesn't really matter all that much. People kind of build it up to matter a lot more than it actually does. So in short, don't focus on seller feedback, especially, I would say don't even focus on it ever really, but especially in the beginning, just focus on selling good products, building up your seller metrics, and you'll start winning the buy box more frequently at higher prices, as well as accumulating seller feedback and seller metrics so that you can get ungated for other products, okay?